So today, as all of our topics are relevant to us, this is one that I'm seeing particularly pervasive, if not an epidemic. We're going to talk about the lack of time and space to really think, process, and decompress in our life. And what I'm seeing in my world and all the worlds I bounce around with is no one has any time for really anything other than the pressing demands on their life. And there's real implications around that. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what is that, and then how to relieve some of that pressure. So to guide us on this journey, I am thrilled to have Marcel Henderson as our awesome guest. Marcel, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brandon. I've been looking forward to it. Thank you.
I have been too. So in a minute, I'm going to ask to hear a little bit more about your journey and story, so you can kind of enlighten the listeners on how you got to this place.
Okay.
But just to make sure I get your title right, so you're the founder of the 3C Group.
That's right, the C3 Group. C3 Group.
C3 Group.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I sorry, I have a typo here. So C3, what do the C stand for?
It stands for Coaching, Consulting, and Counseling.
Coaching, Consulting, and Counseling.
That's right. Yeah.
I think we need all three of those.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I really balance my work between working mostly with people in the business world and finding that, what happens in business happens in our personal life, and they really all bleed together. So I'm there to help them, whether it's business related or personal.
And both you and I have a clinical background.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
So I was enjoying just our chat before the show. I was feeling very calm and relaxed.
Were you?
I was.
Oh, good.
It was kind of nice.
Yeah, we had a good chat.
It was very nice and relaxing. So it's kind of nice when I get to have another kindred spirit on the show with me today.
Thank you.
So how did you get into this? What's been kind of your journey that led you to this point?
Gosh, okay. So good question. Well, growing up, I think I had a part of my childhood that was pretty normal, I would say, in that I had two sisters growing up, and one of them happens to be my twin sister. And
so there's another one of you walking around.
There's another one of me, and we look a lot alike.
Really?
And yeah, we're not identical, but it surprises people how much we are alike, both physically, but also what we ask for and do and things like that too.
Have you ever played jokes on people before?
We did in school. On teachers. The other students knew us apart.
Is that what you call last week, school?
Yeah.
School.
That's right. Yeah. I haven't done it now, but our lives just kind of have come back, and we're now living close together, and we hadn't been together for a long time. So it's a really neat experience at almost 50 to be close to her. So so I have a twin sister, and growing up, we were typical sisters. I mean, my older sister didn't like her younger twin sisters, following her around all the time. And my twin sister didn't like sharing a room with me because I was considered the messy twin. So typical sibling stuff. But there's another part of my childhood that wasn't so typical. There were different forms of abuse in my family growing up, and it was volatile and erratic at times. And my sisters and I did the best that we could to get through it all. I went off to college, went on to graduate school after that, got a job in corporate America, got married, all the typical stuff. And life was going along really great until I got into my early 30s. And at that point, my life started to unravel. My relationship with my husband seemed to take a downward turn. And my job, that was the only year I ever received a poor performance review in my career. And I just thought, what is happening here? My life was just falling apart. So I started searching for answers, and I reached out and began working with a professional coach and a therapist to help me turn my life back around. And during that time, what I discovered really changed things for me, in that I realized that, the way I was protecting myself to deal with all those issues growing up as a child, I would be defensive and lash out at people. And I was using those same types of behaviors in my adult life, and it was not effective at all. So it was a big turning point for me. And I felt like I had just been kind of unleashed from something that had been controlling me my entire life. So it was really at that point that I put a plan together and to turn things around and decide what I wanted to do next in my career. And it was about helping people break limiting behaviors and attitudes so that they could really live their best lives. And so I spend my time today working with individuals, groups, and companies to really create positive and lasting change, and really enjoy what I do. And it's exciting. It's exciting work. It's challenging too, but it's also really exciting to see people make those kinds of changes.
I'm not supposed to have favorite stories. Yeah. That's a pretty darn good one.
Oh, thank you. Well,
That's a really awesome story.
It is I feel very honored. I can look back and realize what those challenges were about now, and not everybody has that opportunity to realize what those challenges were for, but I'm certainly clear about what my challenges were here, and that's to help other people work through their challenges.
Nice.
So thank you.
So, and again, I want to honor the fact that you've taken something in life that was a challenge and turned it into something purposeful.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful transformation.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So our topic today is talk about challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a major challenge right now in terms of
we do.
Finding time and space and finding a way to get off that. Immediately, my mind went to like the hamster wheel.
Yes.
It's like everybody's just on that hamster wheel.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I saw one of those viral videos last week where it was two hamsters on the wheel, and one of them got on while the other one was on, and then the first one slipped off and got his face kind of like stuck up against the glass, and the other one kept going.
That is a very good visual of what we're going to talk about today.
And then the best part, which I think ties into this so well, once the wheel stopped and the one's face got off the glass and he kind of fell down, what did he do? He got back up on the wheel. It kept going.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, right? We are in the age of overload. So,
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we think about this topic, you use the word white space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell us, what does that mean to you? Because I think that's a nice kind of image.
Mm-hmm. So, there's been a real big trend, I would say, around the mindfulness and yoga movements, and you're seeing more of that. Time Magazine had some article last year in their magazine and stuff. There's, so there's a lot of movement because I believe people are in this place of, frenetic activity, and not sure what to do with it. So, but the white space, is very specific to what you're dealing with in the moment, and particularly in the business environment, because we can't go off and practice a yoga move or, take some time and really do some mindfulness work there. But what we can do is we can incorporate a moment in our life and take a little bit of a strategic pause to give our brain a chance to reboot before we move on to the next activity. And that's really what the white space is about, is building in time in your day. Oops, I'm losing my earplug here. Building time in your day so that you can be more creative and productive. Because what we're finding, or what the neuroscience field is finding, is that when we are not taking time to reboot our brains, we're actually experiencing cognitive fatigue. So it's really a detriment to our own productivity, but also to businesses as a whole.
Oh, gosh. I don't even know where to begin with this.
Did I open up a can of worms?
Oh, there's a huge can of worms. Let's start with cognitive fatigue. Okay. So I think a good place for us is, what happens if we don't do this? Mm-hmm. What have you been seeing in that world? What does cognitive fatigue really mean?
Yeah. So the cognitive fatigue, what's happening is that when we're not giving our brains a break, okay, we're not able to recharge. And so it's no different than, think about an Olympian, right? So we got the Olympics coming up, and think about an Olympian that is wanting to achieve peak performance. They know that to do that, they have to schedule in brief periods of recovery. And that's both mental and physical, right? So they understand that. But for some reason in the workforce, we don't think we need to give our brains a break. And the truth is we do. And that's what's happening, is we're not giving our brains a pause so that we can step back and either assimilate the information from the meeting that we just came from, or recover and refocus before jumping on to the next thing. And so I believe that what's happening is that's what's creating that frenetic activity where people can't even calm down and even get to a place of even thinking, at all. I think I think all this activity has actually replaced thought in our minds, and we think we're doing a lot of good, but we're just busy, doing stuff, but not actually adding value. So. Yeah.
I love that. Just busy doing stuff.
Yeah.
And what I'm also seeing, which we haven't talked about, is it almost feels like then becomes this underlying increase in not healthy emotion. Mm-hmm. anxiety in particular.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more where you were just feeling kind of tense all the time.
Right.
And it's almost like you're squeezing your fists. Your fists are like closed, tense all the time.
Right. And it's, so many people are dealing with stress today. I mean, people will tell you they deal with some degree of stress every day, at this point. And one thing we know, again, through science is that when you're in stress mode, then, the limbic system is active and the blood is leaving the top parts of the brainstem and it's going out to the limbs because that's how we protect ourselves, right? It's either run or fight. So that fight or flight mode. But the problem then is that you can't be creative. So when you're constantly in stress, then you are not tapping into that more creative part of your brain and really being as effective as you can be. So the white space is what creates that for us, gives us that moment to reboot and to just step back from all of that activity to just think about how we need to spend our time. So.
Okay, so now you're
feeling
making
better.
Kind of, but at first I was, and then all of a sudden I started feeling worse.
Oh no!
And here's why. Because I thought to myself, I miss those days, which seemed like forever ago, when you could take a 3-week vacation, and it was okay. Mm-hmm. You could take a sabbatical, and it was all right. Yeah. And now it's like, no, that's like a no. If you're gone 3 weeks, then that either implies what have you been doing or how valuable are you? Right. And it's like you're going to miss something. Yeah. Yeah. And that also makes this a little more challenging.
It is. And I call that the false god of busyness that we've fallen prey to, is that we don't think unless we're busy that we're worth much. And that is a message I think a lot of us are holding today, is that, if you walk by somebody's office at work and if they were actually just sitting there kind of thinking about something, what would you think about them, right? You'd probably think, why aren't they working, right?
You got time to just sit there and think.
Right. So that's the dilemma we're in. And I think it came out of good intentions, in that I think, probably somebody went home one weekend thinking, I'm going to work on this project and I just want to get it done. But then social conformity, we follow that pattern, right? Of, people begin to watch others and then they think they're supposed to do it too. And so we've just like your hamster on the wheel, right? You just keep doing it and doing it. And the problem is it's not going to slow down. It's not going to get any different.
I'm a little more cynical. I don't know if it came from good intentions. I think a lot of it, I saw the big technology's played a part in it, because you can work anywhere, anytime. So that means you work all the time, everywhere. Right. But I do think it's the recession around 2008, 2009, where all companies went lean, and they said, okay, now you're going to do 2 people's jobs. And then profits came back, but they didn't backfill a lot of those jobs. So it's not just they talk about benches being thin, but if I used a baseball analogy, and you have nobody playing second base, nobody playing left field, right, and no one's on the bench. So it puts more pressure on people. Yeah,
I agree. I definitely think in the last 10 years, it's definitely accelerated itself. But the problem is that people are looking for an answer, and it's not going to happen at work on its own. I don't know if people think that it's just going to change, and it's not. It's really through us taking our own actions for ourselves to be able to really take control of this. And I think there's many forms of it, but again, I think what the white space does is it helps you in the moment. It's going to help you right then and there. The yoga, the mindfulness, all of that field is something you can continue to build on to help you become more aware, but the white space is what's really going to get you in the moment.
And so the other thing that you'd said earlier that I was like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about that too.
What's that?
Is you said strategic pause. And so I love that as an entry point into white space. So we're at break. Okay. So when we come back from break, I want to talk about how do we do this? How do we overcome this? How do we work in what is a strategic pause? Because I wrote that on my whiteboard, by the way.
Oh, did
when you and I talked, I still have it on my whiteboard.
Oh, wow.
Pause.
Okay.
So let's spend some time talking about that and how do we incorporate that into our daily lives.
Sounds good.
So we're going off to break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Hey everyone, this is Brandon. I hope your 2018 is everything you'd hoped it would be. That said, we could all use a tune-up. go to my site, theworkplacetherapist.com, www.theworkplacetherapist, all one word, .com, for a library of resources for you. You can find past shows, blog posts on navigating workplace dysfunction, and even my TED Talk on the contagiousness of emotions in the workplace. And that's not all. There are the Workplace Happiness Workbooks to help you find happiness in your job, and even a tab to Ask the Therapist, where you can ask me anything on your mind. We all need a tune-up once in a while. Get yours today. Welcome back from break. This is the Brandon Smith Show, and today we're talking about that preciousness in our life, time, and how we do a better job of reclaiming it. And so I've got my fantastic guest, Marcel Henderson, with us today to talk a little about how do we do that. And Marcel, before the break, we started into this idea of white space and this idea of carving out some of that. And you used a phrase which has just stuck in my brain, strategic pause. Okay, what is this?
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you two ways of incorporating white space or a strategic pause into your day. Okay. So if this, for your listeners, if this is a brand new concept, like you just never even thought about incorporating white space into your day, we're going to keep this really simple. Okay. And really all it is it's thinking about, if you had let's just say you have a bottle of water on your desk, and between activities, you just take a sip of water. Okay. Now you can actually do that because the bottle of water might actually be a good reminder. But the idea is that you're giving your brain a chance to reboot. So the idea is that you just want to pause.
I just took a sip of water.
You just took a sip of water. Did it work?
I think so. I felt like after seeing you do that, I said, I now feel like I have to take a sip of water.
Well, it can be kind of a symbolic way of telling yourself to do this. But the whole idea is that you just take a minute between, or it might be a couple of minutes, but it says it's not a long period of time, but you're just taking a short period of time to either assimilate information from what you just finished doing. Let's say you walked out of a 3-hour meeting, before rushing on to the next event, you just take a couple minutes and assimilate what just happened. What do I need to really remember from that? Okay. Or you need to just refocus before you move on to the next activity. So it really depends on what you're doing as to what you need to take time for. But typically what I've seen happening today in business is that people are just rushing from one thing to the next, and they're not giving themselves any time to reboot. And think about it this way. If you have a laptop, right, and you open 20 applications on it at one time, it's not going to run as efficiently and effectively as if you just have a couple open. Well, our brain works the exact same way, and we just keep putting more on throughout the day, and then we rush home and we add the family piece onto it, and then we collapse, from exhaustion, and then we get up the next day and start all over again, and we're dealing with all of that fatigue, both physically and mentally. So it's just taking a pause. So that's a really simple way. What do you, thoughts or?
I love that. I think that's fantastic. I mean, as you were saying that, I thought, wow. And it's, it's very closely related to intentionality.
Yes.
And being intentional and almost making it a mechanism to not only pause, but also digest and have some kind of intentional either thought or action or mantra you want to hold on to.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it can be, okay, I left this meeting. What's the one thing I want to take away from this?
Exactly.
Or, okay, I finished. I've heard of people doing a version of this in their life. I've heard people, they'll say every time I'm driving home, I'll say, what did I get accomplished today? What do I want to focus on for tomorrow?
Yep, exactly.
Or in the first part of the morning, how do I want to be today?
Yes.
As a person.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just taking points in time to being very intentional about pausing, digesting.
Yeah. And the goal is that you want to, if you're just starting with this, is do this throughout the day. Just start practicing between each activity, just taking a minute or two of doing that. So that's where you can be more thoughtful and aware of how you are using your time. So you want to just bring all of that to consciousness of how am I just rushing through one thing to the next? But the more times you're picking up that bottle of water and pausing, the more you're going to be conscious of that and then focusing on the things that most matter, and giving your brain a chance to think of that creative thought, that it's not having a chance to do right now. So that's really the simplest form that I can share with you. But if you want to incorporate more white space in your day, this is a little bit more deeper process, but I think it really has a lasting change for people. So there are typically we are driven by certain forces in our life, okay, and usually these forces are pretty good for us. There's nothing wrong with them, okay? But when, pushed to the limit, then they can become corrupted, okay? And the ones that they usually, for business, usually fall into 4 categories: drive, excellence, information, and activity, okay? So in and of themselves, those are all good things, right? You would want all of your employees focusing on those things, right?
Yeah.
But when drive is overused, it turns into overdrive, okay? So now it becomes ineffective and it reduces our effectiveness and productivity. Excellence, when it's overused, becomes perfectionism, okay? And let me back up. So with drive, for example, let me give you a business example of that. When it goes into overdrive, that looks like mindlessly accepting a meeting invite, or starting to work on a new project without even knowing how you're going to get the projects done that are already on your plate. Okay, that's the overdrive part. Okay, with perfectionism, it's tweaking that meeting agenda or spending way more time on something than what it really requires. All right. The other force that people find themselves in is information to information overload. And I think about that when people get into that obsessiveness of data and analyzing dashboards all the time. Never enough data, right? It's never enough. And then the last one is just activity turning into frenzy, where you're just running from one activity to the next, and just to stay busy all the time. There's never enough of that. So as you can see, those are driving forces. If we can tap into which ones that speak to us the most and where we get trapped in them, then we can battle that with, and I'm going to ask you which ones are yours in a minute, but we can battle that with a question. So I was going to ask you which ones are yours, Brandon.
I was going to come back with a question of what if you just, for example, had someone that said all of them. I'm not saying
not anybody we know.
Would be anybody I know.
Not anybody. I can't think of anyone. Yeah.
In theory.
That's right.
Let's say someone said yes.
Yeah.
I do all those things.
Then you pick the one that seems to be the one that's the most challenging, because you can only work on 1 or 2 things at a time. So pick the one that really, is the one that catches you the most.
Yeah, and I'm wrestling with this because it's hard for me to decouple kind of personality and gravitational pull to certain paths with the general culture of the workforce and workplace today. It seems like everybody, and I fall in this category, so maybe I'm projecting, but it seems like everybody can easily fall into firefighter mode. It's like it's just you're just running from fire to fire to fire, which has a lot of all those elements in it.
Right.
Can at least.
Right.
So that's the hard part. There seems like there's a lot of pressure externally that can trigger any of those.
Yeah. You're spot on. But I had a leader say to me once that, the difference between a leader and a smart guy is somebody who knows how to overcome busyness. And I really think that was a really smart comment that he made, because I think you're right. I think the environment is exactly like you described, but what is going to stand people out from the rest are those that can take that strategic moment to think about, what do I really need to do now? And that's what asking yourself, which of these driving forces are affecting me? And then asking yourself a question. So you're in between activities, for example, and let's just say that, you're feeling yourself being perfectionistic, right? You want to take a second and ask yourself, when is enough enough? Okay, that's a question you could ask. Or, is 80% enough for this particular project, right? So you're using a question to challenge that status quo that's in your head of, I need to just keep moving into the same environment that I'm used to, versus stepping back and then reevaluating whether that's really the right thing to do or not.
Does that totally makes sense. Okay. Totally makes sense. Yeah. And for me, of the 4, you asked the question of which one will be most prone to. I'd probably be most prone to overdrive. And what that would look like is it's easier for me to just quickly say yes.
Yeah.
Then evaluate, can I do this? And what if I say no? Do I got to find somebody? I'll just say yes.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon I'm just saying yes to lots of things.
Right.
And it's bleeding past my work hours, and it's bleeding into other hours, and I'm just running from thing to thing to thing.
Well, it comes back to your comment about what you said about what's your intention, right? So if I know what's my intention on a bigger scale, then it does free me to not feel like I need to respond to everything all the time. But in that situation, a question you could ask yourself too is it something that I can hand off to somebody else, or is it something that I could, give to somebody as a development opportunity where, you're rethinking how you're spending your time, and is this really the best use of your time? And I fall into the overdrive category.
In the entrepreneurial world, there's this phrase they use. It's this pivot for entrepreneurs. They want to grow their business and grow in their business. They have to go from working in their business to on their business. And I'm finding that's popping up on almost all the action plans I'm writing for leaders these days. And so what I'm putting, it's one of the sub-bullets I put under there reminds me of our discussion here. And I'm saying to them, remember your hourly rate, because you don't want to be the most expensive light bulb changer.
Right. Beautiful. Yeah.
So it's just a way to think like, should I really be going to that meeting? Is that really is a good use of the resource that I'm being trusted with?
Right.
Or is this an opportunity for somebody else?
That's exactly right. I mean, how many times have we gone to meetings or accepted something when we really didn't think about how is this going to really benefit me or my team or my company? We're just kind of, again, just going through it. One thing too that I've learned through some of the recent research in the neuroscience field is that we really spend a lot of time in what's called procedural memory. And that in and of itself is where we're just kind of going through the motions and we're not even aware how we're doing that. But if you think about it, I was thinking about it this morning when I was getting ready. I mean, get out of bed, get the coffee, get dressed, go to work. Those things are really in automatic. I don't have to use that higher, cortex part of my brain to do that. So this is pushing people to have to challenge the way that they're thinking about how they're spending their time. And because it's just so habitual now, we know what's expected. And there's nobody that's saying, why are you doing that? Why are you spending your time that way? We have to be our own, own person that's doing that for ourselves. So
it sounds like the hard part in this is the word no.
Yeah, I think you're right.
For some people. For me, that's the hard part. But for other people, it might be to say, I've written this before in action plans, follow the good enough principle.
Yeah.
And for other people, that's their version of a bad word.
Yeah.
They're like, what? No, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
No, I always strive for excellence.
Yeah. Well, I used to say this to my boss for many years, and she and I had a fantastic working relationship. So not everybody I know can do this, but I never said no to her. What I would say is when she would say, we need to work on this next thing, I would say, well, how do you want to prioritize that?
I think that's beautiful.
So, so I don't have to always say no to something, but it doesn't mean that things can't get done, but it just means you have to figure out how it's going to get done, and it doesn't mean that I always have to be the one that's doing it either, right? So it's just, again, another way of opening up and thinking about problem solving, and how we get things done.
So one last question around this, because I see we're getting close to the end on time, and I want to make sure I ask you one of my questions I ask all guests.
Yeah.
Can you do this when you're doing something else? So, for example, is commuting an okay time to take a strategic pause, or because you're already running another program, i.e. driving a car or whatever commuting means to you, is it not a good thing?
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm getting at is you have to carve out quiet time to be able to do this.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And no, you don't have to carve out quiet time. I mean, the whole intent and idea behind this is that you are working in between activities. So it's a pause. I mean, literally think about it as a pause. And I think car time can be looked at as a pause, right? Traveling to and from meetings or traveling to and from work and home. So you use that as a period of reflecting and deciding, what am I holding on to? Or you pull into the driveway and you decide before you get out, I'm just going to take a recuperative pause before I jump into my other life, right? Just take that recuperative pause. So it's just a matter of seconds or even a minute or two to make that transition. That's really what it is.
I'd written down on my whiteboard, 60 seconds.
Yeah.
I think you had told me that.
Yeah,
before.
it was. I actually did this in a leadership program where we started it out with a 60-second pause is what we called it. And the leaders, it was just amazing. It was like I was watching them come up for air after being underwater for minutes. I mean, we actually would talk about what that was like to just take that 60-second pause. And it's clear to me that people are really needing this in their life right now more than ever.
Yeah. So I ask all my guests this question.
Okay.
What's one life hack you have for us on how we can make our life a little less dysfunctional, either personally or professionally?
Well, I'm going to keep it to the theme of the day. And I would say that it's really around solitude or silence and knowing that that is actually a competitive advantage for us, both professionally as well as personally. And I think the world tells us the opposite, that more is more. And I think that we're realizing less is more, and that the solitude and just carving out a few minutes for yourself is actually better for you and actually creates more advantage for you in life.
Awesome.
This
has been a great show. Marcel, I really appreciate you coming on. So if people want to learn more about you, what you're up to, or connect with you, where can they go?
Yeah, probably the best way to go to find me, oops, I lost my headset again. The best way to find me is through my website, and that is at www.thec3group.us.
The C3 Group.
So the letter C and then the number 3, thec3group.us. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening and watching the show. Continue to stay with us and keep up the fight against dysfunction every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you haven't checked out my website, please check it out. It's The Workplace Therapist. Just went through an overall refresh to make that much easier and usable for you. So you can download old shows, you can check out the blog posts and other resources that are there to make your life that much better. So until next week and our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.